Are you interested in making your own white wine at home, just like this? Well, if you are, keep watching. I'll show you how. So the first thing you do is take the lid off your juice and add about 1/4 teaspoon of potassium metabisulfite or sodium metabisulfite. So I'm going to go ahead and measure that up and add it in. And I'm going to put the lid back on loosely overnight. The next day, make sure the temperature is about room temperature, about 68 degrees for me. That's fine. And I transfer it to this glass carboy. So that's 6 gallons of white grape juice and a 6.5 gallon carboy. You see the head space there? It's important because when this thing starts foaming up, you need the head space so it doesn't overflow. So you need a fermenting vessel larger than the amount of liquid that you're going to ferment. Another good practice to do is to take a sample of the wine or the juice, and this sample is going to be used for measuring the starting gravity or the Brix, which is the amount of sugar it's starting with, as well as a sample to measure the total acids in here. Now this is the juice. I've used this juice for a few years now, and I've never had to adjust this white juice in these buckets at all from this place, so I'm pretty confident I won't need to make any changes. But if you want to double check, that would be the thing to do. So now I'm going to add about 1 teaspoon of yeast nutrient per gallon of juice. So 6 gallons of juice, 6 teaspoons of yeast nutrient. Okay, there we go. Now the next step here is to prepare the yeast. So I'm going to put this package of yeast in about 2 ounces of warm water per the instructions on the packet. And there's the yeast slurry ready to pour into the carboy. Okay, I'm going to give it a little swirl, get it all mixed up in there, and I'm going to pour it into the carboy. Just like that. Then add an airlock to it, just like that, with this little S-shaped one. So the idea here is to trap the gas in here. The carbon dioxide can escape, but no air can get in. Therefore, it's a nice closed fermentation. So now it's going to ferment here for the next few weeks. I'm going to actually move this thing to a dark corner of my basement, probably cover it in a towel to keep the light off it, keep it cool. My basement's about, in the low to mid 60s. That's perfect for this white wine, and we'll come back in a few weeks. Okay, it's been about 2 weeks. This thing fermented dry within about a week. It was very active, and I let it sit for an extra week just to be sure it was done. I'll test the Brix level as well, and I'm going to rack this to a smaller container. And just like I suspected, the Brix level is below 0, which is actually not accurate, but the high alcohol content throws off the readings, but you know it's fermented to dryness when it's below 0, basically. So now I'm going to purge this 5 gallon carboy with carbon dioxide just to get some of the air out of there, so to maintain the freshness of the wine when I transfer it. And you can actually feel it coming out the top, so you know it's working. I just want to get the air out of there and replace it with CO2. It's a protective layer, so when I transfer it from the big container to the small one, there'd be very little oxygen pickup in the wine. I also went ahead and purged the air out of a 1 gallon, a half gallon, a quart, and a pint glass for overflow as well. So so I pumped all the air out of there, and I got a nice, hopefully a nice blanket of CO2 in each of these containers. All right, time to start the auto siphon. Let me just give it a couple priming pumps here. There we go. There it goes right down the tubing and into the carboy down below. And the tube goes all the way down inside, all the way down the bottom. So now I have the hose down the bottom. I'm trying to fill it up slowly, not splash it too much because I don't want any oxygen to get into the wine now. So I have this blanket of CO2, hopefully that's still in there. And I have the hose down in the bottom so it's not going to splash in the bubble all around too much. And I'm going to fill this thing all the way to the top, almost to the top. Okay, now it's getting close to the top. I'm going to pinch off the hose here in a minute, and I'm going to transfer it to the smaller container here. Okay, clamp it up, pull it out. Let it dribble a little bit there. And then I'm going to transfer it as soon as it drains up to the clamp. I'm going to grab it and just move it over here. Right down that little container there. And let it go. Okay, that seems about to be all I could fill up. So I have a problem here. I don't want this air gap in there. So now I'm going to have to transfer this to one of my smaller containers after all. Okay, and we got a bit more for the next one. Okay, here we go. And and I got a tiny bit left here. It looks like for the small jar. Awesome. And here we go. This is the result of that 6-gallon batch of juice. It filled up the 5-gallon carboy right to the top. It filled up a half gallon right to the top. It filled up a quart jar up to the top, and it filled a pint jar right up to the top. It was nothing left over. It was actually perfect for this. And that's why I have the different sized jars, because I never know every time I do this how much volume I want. So I don't want any airspace at all above the wine, if possible, to keep the wine from the oxygen, which can then, you know, oxidize the wine. So I have different sized jars to accommodate no airspace in them. It's that simple. Well, it's hard to see here, but here's what's left over in the bottom of the primary fermenter. Just all the yeast there and some of the, maybe the fine lees from the grape juice, but it's all, you know, it's a pretty good amount left behind. I've moved my white wine out into my garage where it's cooler than my basement while it settles out. So the point of the cooler weather is to get the yeast to settle out of solution on its own, as well as precipitate these crystals that form in here. That will if you don't do it in this step and then wait till you bottle, they'll precipitate in the bottle when you chill it, and they end up looking like little shards of glass, which is just unsightly. So I'm trying to do two things at once here: precipitate the yeast quicker and precipitate these crystals that would otherwise form in the bottle. So the garage proved to not be as cold as I was hoping it would be this time of year. So I brought the wine back inside, and a spot opened up in my kegerator. My keg went dry, and I have room now to put the white wine in a refrigerator to precipitate these crystals, and I'm going to do that. But as I do that, I want to take the chance, the opportunity, now that it's been over a month since the last time I racked this thing, to rack it again and add some potassium metabisulfite along the way. Now to rack this, I had to sanitize another carboy, as well as sanitize anything that comes in contact with this wine, including this racking cane here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this tank of carbon dioxide, and I am going to use the racking cane to inject the CO2 down to the bottom of the carboy, and I'm going to flood it with CO2 and push the oxygen out of the container, because you do not want oxygen during this step in the process going forward, especially for white wines. You definitely want to keep oxygen away from your wine. It will oxidize it and make it go bad. So I'm going to, as a safety precaution, flood this with some CO2 and then rack into this. So then I'm going to add an 1/8 teaspoon of potassium metabisulfite in there. I'm going to insert my auto siphon in here. Then put the other end down into the empty carboy down below. And there we go. It's going. And there it goes, filling up from the bottom up under that cloud of CO2. So that's what I wanted. I didn't want any splashing. I also didn't want any kind of air getting into this thing. So with the cloud of CO2, as this thing fills up, it's pushing the CO2 out the top. Exactly what I wanted to do. So as this thing is filling up here, I went and grabbed some more sanitized jars to catch the overflow. Because if you remember, I had about a quart jar and a little half-pint jar there. And I got an extra one just in case, different sizes, because I want them to top up as best I can, each of them. So I have a variety here. Okay, you can see here my 5-gallon carboy just ran out of steam. You can see there's some space here now. There's some losses from the sediment and the inability of the siphon to get every single last drop of wine out of that old carboy. So I'm going to have to top up the rest of this with some of the smaller jars I've got. Now here's the bottom of the old carboy. You see there's some stuff down there, some old yeast, hopefully some tartrate crystals, and a bit of wine left over. So this is what's been left behind. And here it is, filled up all the way up to the neck. And then put a cap on it. It doesn't need an airlock anymore because it's completely been fermented through. So I just put on a cap. And here's the result. 5-gallon carboy filled all the way up, a couple quart jars filled all the way up, and a half-pint jar filled all the way up. So that's the remainder. The rest of it either got spilled, left behind in the old carboys, or I drank it. And here we are. The wine is in my kegerator. So it's all in here. It's about 38 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm going to let this cold crash and precipitate the tartrate crystals this way. Okay everyone, let's see how we're doing here. It's been about a month, and I am going to take this out of here and I'm going to clarify the wine even further. It's looking pretty good though. So what you're looking at here is one of my quart jars of the white wine I pulled out of the fridge, and at the very bottom down here you can see speckles here. Now these are the tartrate crystals successfully precipitated out of the wine. So that was my goal. That's why it was in the fridge as long as it was. So those will no longer be a problem later on in the bottle. And what you're looking at here is my 5-gallon carboy in the bottom of it. And here again, all the tartrate crystals all around, and there's a layer on the bottom that you can't really see here. And that was mission accomplished. So now, you know, let's just so you know what that is. That's what that is. Tartrate crystals, and you don't want those in the finished wine. The clarifying agent I'm going to use is this stuff called bentonite. It's a type of clay that you can get at online or maybe homebrew shops or winemaking shops. And the point of this clay is that you mix it with some water. You turn it into a slurry, and you mix it in with your wine. And over time, a matter of days or a couple of weeks, it grabs onto those hazy particles in your wine and drops them out of solution right to the bottom of the carboy. So I'm going to mix a batch of this up. So what I have here is about 1 1/3 cups of boiling water, or just was boiling, really hot water. Mix about 4 teaspoons of that into here according to the directions on the package here. And I'm going to stir it up. Okay, now I'm going to stir it up. See how it clumps up like that? I mean, it's clay. It really is clay. It's just, you just got to rehydrate it into a slurry. Okay, it's still a little bit clumpy, but I'm going to keep stirring it over the next hour or two, and I'm going to let it rehydrate for a few hours until it's all homogeneously mixed together and it's a nice even slurry. Okay, it's been a few hours at least, maybe several, and the clumps have all dissolved. It's completely hydrated and ready to use. One nice thing to do before you start racking this thing is to go ahead and get a little taste sample for yourself and see how the wine's progressing. Here we go. Oop. So I got like a little sample here. I want to give this a taste. Okay, a little taste test. This is good. It's crisp, it's clean, it's refreshing. This is a good wine, so it's coming along nicely. Okay, it's time to siphon this thing out of here. There we go. I got the other end of the hose already in the empty carboy down below, off camera. Give it a little prime and a pump. There we go. And there it goes, filling up from the bottom there on the carboy down on the floor. One thing I didn't show on camera on this time, but I've shown it before in a previous scene, is I like to purge these things with some carbon dioxide from my CO2 tank, and I fill it with a cloud of carbon dioxide there to help keep the oxygen away from the wine, because again, with the white wine especially, from this point on, you really want little contact with oxygen. So having a cloud of CO2 in there would be good. Okay, it's getting towards the top. I'm going to slow and turn off this flow here. There we go. Temporarily, because I want some headspace here to add the slurry and to stir it up. Alright, I'm going to take my slurry here. I'm going to add, between 1 to 2 tablespoons of slurry per gallon of wine. This is a 5-gallon size, so, anywhere between 5 and 10 tablespoons worth. So let's give it a shot. Alright, I put 7 in there. I split the difference between 5 and 10, just an even 7 tablespoons. So now I'm going to stir this up. I got my degassing wand. It's been sanitized, of course. Stick that in here and attach the drill. Alright, so let's go ahead and give it a stir. There we go. Now let's take a better look at these crystals I keep talking about. You can see in the bottom there's a film of these crystals, but on the back wall, way in the back side back here, is a whole line of crystals stuck to the side of the glass. And you can kind of, it's kind of hard to see them here, but there they are, see? That's what I wanted to get out of that wine. This little small jar here has some samples in there too. See the little corner crud there? And if I put my finger in there, let's see. I can't scoop one up, but anyway, that's what those were. So those were out of the wine. Woohoo! And here's the result. It looks a bit cloudy right now, but that's because I put the bentonite slurry in there. And that's going to be cloudy, but it'll settle out. Same thing for the quartz. I missed putting any inside this little jug, but it's not that much. It's not going to matter. And a little left over for my efforts there. I'm going to drink this when I'm done recording this. So there we go. So now I can let this sit down in the dark corner of my basement again for probably a couple more weeks while it clarifies, and then I'll be ready to bottle. It's about a week later, and you can see how well this thing settled out. It's much clearer now. And at the bottom of all these jars, you see a layer of the clay that settled out and the stuff that it pulled out of the wine to make it clear. And there you go. You can see it closer right here. See? A little layer in the bottom of the jar. My next step here is to purge some of the air out of this with some CO2 in order to keep the oxygen exposure to the wine at a minimum. Alright, there we go. Got it filled up a little bit. I'm going to cap it here. And there's the leftover. So I filled up this 5-gallon carboy and about a quart in this half-gallon jug right here. I'm going to put this right in the fridge, and I'm going to drink the rest of this probably over the next night or two. But This sucker is going to settle for a few days and I'm going to bottle it. And here's the result. Let's give it a test. This is good. Well worth the effort. A couple of months of time, some patience, a little bit of money, but really a great quality wine for less than what you'd pay for the same quality wine in the store. I surmise, of course I could be biased, this is probably a good $18 to $20 bottle of wine. And I have probably paid for probably like maybe $3 or $4 worth per bottle. So, you know, less than a quarter's the cost, same quality, good hobby. I learned something along the way, and this is fun. So thanks for watching. I got other videos on brewing and winemaking online, as well as barbecue, so check those out, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out other videos on my YouTube channel, and don't forget to subscribe.